The mansion in Bellevue Hills was unusually silent that morning, far too silent for a house with children. And then it happened. A small, fragile sound, so delicate that even the air itself seemed to pause just to listen. "Daddy." Eleanor Ashford froze at the doorway. Her Hermes handbag slipped from her hand and hit the marble floor with a soft clack. She was nearly petrified, her emerald green eyes widening, locked onto the scene before her. Her twin daughters, Ruby and Pearl, children who had never spoken a single word in all 5 years of their existence, were sitting on the soft wool rug, their sparkling eyes turned toward the man kneeling on the floor. Caleb Winters, in his faded Navy janitorial uniform, work gloves still on his hands, had his arms open toward the girls. His voice trembled as he whispered, "It's okay. Sweetheart, Daddy's here." And then the sound came again, clearer, stronger. "Daddy?" This time, from the other child. In that moment, everything inside Eleanor plunged into a void. Her chest tightened, her throat burned dry, her whole body locked in place. Her daughters, born paralyzed, unable to walk, unable to speak, were now moving their lips, forming the first word of their lives. A word that shattered every diagnosis the top specialists had ever given. She couldn't breathe. For 5 years, experts from Seattle Children's Medical Center had insisted Ruby and Pearl would never speak. Therapists said their brains couldn't process language. But here, in her own home, the impossible was happening. Her 2 children were calling the janitor Daddy. Caleb had no idea Eleanor was standing there. His eyes were gentle, wholly focused on the girls, his warm voice soft, as if any louder sound might cause the fragile moment to dissolve. "Sweetheart, say it again," he coaxed gently. Eleanor's heart sank to the very bottom. She had spent millions of dollars on hospitals, therapies, machines, and doctors. She had prayed quietly and cried in places where no one could see. Her husband, Andrew, had died in a plane crash when the girls were only 3 months old. Since that day, she had tried to turn this house into something solid, orderly, structured, anything that would keep the grief from leaking through. Yet a single word had broken everything. She stepped back, slowly, before anyone could notice she'd been there. The door closed behind her with a soft sound, but the word Daddy clung to her mind like a ghost refusing to leave. Eleanor walked down the long hallway. Her Louboutin heels touched the marble floor without making a sound, just like she herself. Beautiful, but silent for many years. The tall cream-colored walls were lined with portraits of ancestors, all smiling, while the house itself remained cold. A thin breeze slipped through a cracked window. For the first time, Eleanor felt as if the house was watching her. She entered her office and sat at the large oak desk. Her fingers touched her familiar signing pen, but her mind couldn't hold on to anything. All she could see was the image of her daughters reaching toward Caleb, their eyes filled with a vibrancy she had never witnessed. She had lived in silence for too long. When Andrew was alive, the house overflowed with laughter. He sang in the garage, told stories at dinner, hummed melodies when Ruby and Pearl were still in her womb. But after he died, she replaced laughter with rules, music with control. She believed that if she kept everything tight enough, she wouldn't shatter again. But now, something inside her was cracking. Not pain. Something she didn't have a name for. She leaned back, staring up at the ceiling, trying to convince herself she might have misheard. Maybe the girls hadn't really spoken. Maybe it was just meaningless noise. But no, she had heard it clearly, not once, but twice. Eleanor stood and walked to the window. From the second floor, she could see the vast garden below. once designed to be filled with joy. But the swings had never been pushed. The grass held no tiny footprints. Toys remained tucked in their boxes year after year. She had created a world that was correct, but not alive. And then Caleb Winters had appeared. He'd arrived 3 weeks earlier. The management company said he was hard-working, quiet, and reliable. Originally from Redmond, with experience in several hospitals and centers. Eleanor had barely spoken to him, only glimpsed him in corners of the hallways, cleaning or humming softly. He was meant to be invisible among a large staff. But the girls noticed him. Nurses had said, "The girls follow his voice. They're calmer when he's around." Eleanor had dismissed all of it. She assumed everyone was imagining the beautiful things they wished were true, the way people cling to the tiniest hope when they've been desperate long enough. Now she didn't know what to believe. Eleanor put her hands over her face and exhaled. What did he do to them? How did he do it? She walked down the hall toward the care room. The door was slightly open. Inside, Caleb sat on the floor, the twins asleep beside him. He was writing something in a brown notebook, head slightly bowed, humming a slow melody. Eleanor didn't enter. She simply watched. Ruby and Pearl breathed steadily, their faces peaceful. One of them twitched slightly, as if a dream brushed softly across her cheek. Caleb gently tucked the blanket around her. Every movement was tender, as if each touch carried meaning. He didn't look like Andrew. Andrew had been tall, blonde, blue-eyed, the classic New England man. Caleb was shorter, leaner, with messy brown hair, sun-browned skin, and the tired face of a man who had endured too much. Yet somehow, the feeling he brought into the room was exactly what Andrew used to bring. Warmth, life, presence. Eleanor's throat tightened. She turned away before Caleb noticed and returned to her bedroom. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lying in the darkness, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every sound in the mansion suddenly sharpened. The ticking clock, the faint whistle of air through the vents, the rustling leaves outside the window. And beneath all those sounds, one word refused to leave her mind. "Daddy." It wasn't just a word. It was a door opening toward something she thought she had lost forever. Eleanor shot upright, her body trembling slightly. She whispered into the darkness, "Andrew, if you can hear me, what is happening to our children?" There was no answer, only the sound of her own heavy breathing. But she knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, she had to speak to Caleb. She needed to understand what he had done, and why her daughters had found their voices in the arms of a stranger. What she didn't yet know was that the truth ahead would shake everything she had ever believed about love, healing, and faith. If you're following this story and want to know what truly happened to Ruby and Pearl, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. What do you think lies behind the strange connection between Caleb and the two little girls? The Washington sky was gray and heavy the following morning. A light drizzle tapped against the tall glass windows of the Ashford estate, creating a soft, lulling rhythm. Eleanor had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the word "Daddy," and saw her two daughters reaching toward Caleb. She sat at the dining table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Staff moved quietly around the room, each one careful not to disturb their employer. Something in the house felt different, as if something invisible had shifted during the night. When Caleb walked in carrying a tray of fresh towels and cleaning supplies, Eleanor slowly lifted her gaze. His calm expression barely changed. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford," he said softly. Eleanor didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, Her voice hovered between curiosity and doubt. "May I speak with you for a moment?" He stopped beside the table. "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor gestured for him to sit, but Caleb didn't. He remained standing, his hands folded neatly in front of his apron, his posture steady. She studied him in silence for a long moment, as though trying to find something in his face, something she herself couldn't name yet. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice careful, lower. "I saw what happened yesterday." The room seemed to be still. "I heard them speak." Caleb's eyes softened. He didn't look surprised. "Yes, ma'am." "They said, Daddy," Eleanor continued, her words falling out slowly. "Both of them. How did you make them do that?" Caleb glanced at his hands for a brief moment, and then looked back up. "I didn't make them do anything, ma'am. They did it on their own." Eleanor leaned forward. "You must have done something. You sang, or said something special. My children have been silent since they were born. The best doctors in Seattle couldn't help them. So what did you do?" Caleb's tone remained steady, unchanged. "I talk to them every day, ma'am. I read to them, I sing, and I hold their hands when they're scared. Maybe finally, they felt safe enough to respond." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. "Safe?" she repeated, almost to herself. She bowed her head slightly, shaking it. "You think that's all it takes? Safety? After all the money, all the therapies, you're telling me that feeling safe is enough?" Caleb didn't argue. He simply replied gently, "Sometimes that's all children need, ma'am. Someone who doesn't give up on them." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows, sending a low, steady rhythm through the room. Eleanor didn't know what to feel. She wanted to believe him, but a part of her refused to accept that something so simple could achieve what an entire team of specialists had failed to accomplish. She rose to her feet, her voice firming. "You were hired to clean, not to teach. Don't do anything with my children without telling me first." Caleb bowed his head, nodding respectfully. "Yes, ma'am." He lifted the tray and left the room. Eleanor remained where she was, eyes fixed on the empty space where the door had just closed. His calm voice echoed in her mind. Someone who doesn't give up on them. She finished the rest of her coffee without tasting it, then walked into her office. The digital clock on the wall read 9:17 a.m., but to Eleanor, it already felt like midday. She sat at her desk, staring at the stack of files in front of her, reports, contracts, lists of calls to return. Suddenly, all of it felt meaningless. She opened her laptop and pulled up the girl's medical files, rereading the familiar words. Severe motor impairment. Nonverbal. Low cognitive response. For years, she had accepted those words as a sentence. But yesterday, that sentence had wavered. She couldn't stop thinking about Caleb's voice. Steady, certain, as if he knew something she had never understood. That afternoon, Eleanor asked Nurse Jennifer Hale to bring the twins to the playroom. She wanted to see it for herself. Jennifer rolled Ruby and Pearl into the room, each strapped into her small support chair. Their eyes drifted around the empty space. "Hello, my loves," Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice soft. "It's Mommy." Neither child moved. She stepped closer. "Can you hear Mommy?" she asked gently. Still silence. A sharp ache pierced Eleanor's chest. She took another step and touched Ruby's tiny hand. It was warm and soft, but the little girl didn't react. Jennifer spoke quietly behind her. "They've been silent all day, ma'am. Caleb is usually with them in the mornings, But today he was cleaning in the West Wing. "Call him here," Eleanor said almost reflexively. "Yes, ma'am." A few minutes later, Caleb entered. His uniform was slightly damp from work, the yellow gloves tucked into his apron pocket. He stepped in carefully, avoiding direct eye contact with Eleanor. When Ruby saw him, her expression changed instantly. Her tiny fingers twitched against the armrest. Pearl's head slowly turned toward Caleb. Caleb smiled, his voice lowering. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered. Both girls blinked at the same time, then gave a faint, soft smile, one Eleanor had never seen directed at her before. Caleb knelt between their chairs and began humming a gentle, slow melody. It wasn't a song Eleanor recognized, just a simple, soothing tune. Ruby made a tiny sound in her throat, as if trying to imitate him. Pearl's hand stretched out just a bit farther. Eleanor's eyes widened. "Do you see that?" she whispered to Jennifer, her voice nearly breathless. Jennifer nodded, whispering back, "They've never done that with anyone else, ma'am." Caleb looked up, his expression still calm. "You see, ma'am, they can respond. They just need time, not pressure." Eleanor felt something shifting inside her, clearly, unmistakably. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Her throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't anger. After a long silence, she managed only one sentence. "You may stay with them for the entire afternoon." Caleb nodded, replying softly, "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor turned to leave the room, but just as she reached the doorway, she stopped. She looked back one more time. Caleb sat on the floor between the twins, still humming softly. Ruby moved her fingers to the rhythm. Pearl tilted her head slightly, her eyes half closed, her face relaxed and peaceful. Eleanor stood there quietly and realized a simple, painful truth. Right now, her children don't need another doctor. They only needed to be truly seen. And Caleb was the one who had seen them. That night, Eleanor sat in her office again. The rain had stopped, leaving only the faint hum of the house in the darkness. She looked out the window toward the dimly lit window of the care room. She whispered to herself, "What is he doing that all of us have missed?" She didn't yet know the answer, but she would soon. And the truth waiting ahead would change everything she believed about life, love, and what truly makes a family whole. The next day arrived in a heavy silence. The Seattle sky was still wrapped in a dense gray, and damp winds swept past the old oaks surrounding Bellevue Hills. Inside the estate, everything was as clean, orderly, and quiet as ever. But Eleanor couldn't find any peace. She had spent almost the entire night just thinking about what she'd seen in the playroom. The image of her daughters turning their eyes toward Caleb kept replaying in her mind. The way they moved when they heard his voice, the way their tiny hands reached for him. For 5 years, they had barely responded to anyone, their gazes drifting into nothingness. And now, they were waking up, little by little. She needed an explanation. Eleanor went upstairs, walking down the hallway toward the care room. She hadn't even touched the doorknob when a warm, gentle voice drifted out from inside. "Caleb." She pushed the door open very softly and stopped. Caleb was sitting cross-legged on the soft rug, the twins lying beside him. The curtains were drawn wide, letting the pale morning light of a gray day wash over the room. His back was straight, his hands patiently rubbing lotion into the girl's arms. His voice was low and steady. He was singing. And in that moment, Eleanor's entire body froze. She knew that song. It hit her like a memory she had spent years trying to bury deep in her subconscious. Andrew, her husband, had hummed that melody every night during the months she was pregnant. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. She didn't know why, but it made her heart ache. She stepped into the room, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she were afraid of breaking something fragile. "Where did you learn that song?" Caleb turned around, a little surprised, but still composed. "Oh, I didn't know you were here," he said quietly. Eleanor moved closer, her breath unsteady. "The song you're singing, where did you learn it?" Caleb looked down at the floor for a moment, then reached for a small notebook lying beside him. It was old, the edges frayed, the pages slightly yellowed. He held it out to her. "I found this," he said. "It was behind one of the cabinets in the care room. I think it belonged to your husband." Eleanor reached out for the notebook, her fingers visibly trembling. The handwriting on the page was unmistakable. Those slanted blue ink lines, Andrew's handwriting. Inside were notes on childcare, a few small recipes, and near the middle of the notebook, there was a list of lullabies. The last one was the song Caleb had just been singing. At the top of the page, Andrew had written, "For when I'm not here anymore." A deep, sharp pain spread through Eleanor's chest. "You found this in here?" she asked, her voice tight. "Yes, ma'am," Caleb replied. "I thought maybe the girls would want to hear their father's song. I didn't mean to overstep." Eleanor slowly shook her head. Her eyes were still locked on the page. "No." "You didn't overstep," she said, her voice breaking. "You did what I should have done." Caleb smiled faintly, a gentle, kind smile. He glanced down at the twins and said, "They love this one. Every time I sing it, they try to move their mouths along." Eleanor looked at Ruby and Pearl. Both girls were gazing at Caleb, their fingers twitching slightly as if they wanted to reach for him. She knelt down beside them and touched Ruby's hand. The little girl didn't flinch. Instead, for the first time in years, she turned her head toward Eleanor. A tiny sound, like a broken breath, escaped the child's lips. Eleanor went rigid. Was that something?" she whispered, almost afraid to breathe. Caleb smiled. "She's trying to speak," he said. "She's been practicing when I read to them. Little sounds, weak breaths. I think she's getting stronger." Eleanor swallowed with difficulty. Her throat felt parched. She had waited years just to hear a sound like that. Anything at all. And now that it was actually happening, she had no idea how to respond. She rose slowly to her feet, her mind spinning. "I don't understand," she said. "The specialists all told me there was no hope," Caleb answered in a gentle but steady voice. "Hope doesn't disappear, ma'am. People just stop listening to it." Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. There was no arrogance there, no trace of self-importance, only pure sincerity. That afternoon, Eleanor couldn't bring herself to leave the care room. After lunch, she quietly returned and stood in the hallway. Through the crack in the door, she heard Caleb's voice, steady and calm. He was reading a picture book, his voice slow and clear. After each sentence, he paused for a few seconds, patient, waiting, as if every moment mattered. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can talk," he whispered. "You can try." Eleanor leaned her back against the wall, arms folded across her chest, not out of anger, but because her heart felt so heavy. Her eyes burned. She had lived with these two children for 5 years, and yet today was the first day she truly saw them. Caleb was not just cleaning. He was healing something in this house, something that had broken a long time ago. She stood there for a long time, listening. Caleb's voice was simple, not poetic. but it reached the deepest places inside Eleanor, places she thought had died with Andrew. When the story ended, Caleb began to sing that lullaby again. Andrew's familiar melody wrapped around the room, soft as an embrace. Eleanor's lips trembled. "Andrew," she whispered, "if you could see this, he's doing the things I couldn't." She turned away, but before she left the hallway, she glanced through the crack one more time. Caleb had fallen silent. He was writing something in the notebook, probably the kinds of things he recorded every day. That night, when the whole house had fallen asleep, Eleanor sat alone in her office. She opened the notebook Andrew had left behind and read every line. Each line was his voice, each word a piece of him. And then she came across a passage that stole the air from her lungs. "If anything ever happens to me, remind the girls that love can still reach them, even when words can't." Eleanor closed the notebook. Her hands were shaking. For years, she had tried to heal with money, science, discipline, and control. But Andrew had understood something she never dared to believe. Sometimes, love is the only medicine left. She leaned back and whispered softly, "Thank you, Caleb," even though she knew he was asleep and couldn't hear her. The next morning, when Eleanor woke up, the air in the house felt lighter, brighter. She didn't know what lay ahead, but deep inside, she knew one thing for certain. Something inside her had changed forever. And this was only the beginning. Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about Caleb. Who was he? Why did he care so deeply about two children he had only met a few weeks ago? And most importantly, how could he understand exactly what her daughters needed when an entire team of doctors, specialists, and the best experts she had ever hired had all failed? On Wednesday morning, she decided to find out. Eleanor called the staffing agency that had referred Caleb. Her voice was cold, professional, classic Eleanor Ashford. "I need the complete file of Caleb Winters, every position he's ever held, the reasons he left, and all references." "Yes, Mrs. Ashford. We'll send it immediately." An hour later, her inbox received a thick PDF document. Eleanor sat in her office, poured herself a cup of hot tea, and opened the file. Each line appeared on the screen like a sketch of the man she still did not fully understand. Caleb Winters, age 38, born in Spokane, Washington. Employment history: maintenance staff at Seattle Children's Medical Center, 4 years. Janitorial staff at Evergreen Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, 2 years. Technical staff at Redmond Heights Apartments, Paudied 1 year. Family status: divorced. 1 daughter, Daisy Winters, 5 years old. Single parent since 2022. Comments from previous employers: reliable, hardworking, extremely patient with children. Frequently volunteers to help disabled children during breaks. His daughter has special medical needs. Eleanor stopped at the last line. His daughter also had special needs. She opened the attached document, a medical summary Caleb had allowed the employer to view. Daisy Winters, diagnosed with quadriplegic cerebral palsy, nonverbal, limited mobility. Eleanor set her teacup down. Her hand trembled slightly. Caleb wasn't just a janitor who happened to be good with children. He was a father fighting every day against the same things she herself was facing. He understood, not from textbooks, not from courses. He understood through the pain and love of his own life. A wave of emotion crashed over her: guilt, shame, and something else: deep gratitude. She had seen him as a worker, a pair of hands, someone invisible. But he was so much more. Eleanor closed her laptop and sat frozen for a long time, letting the truth sink in. Today was Caleb's day off, He had taken Daisy for her routine medical checkup. He had told her that, but she hadn't paid attention. Now, everything felt different. She glanced at the clock. 2:15 p.m. A thought flashed through her mind, one that Eleanor Ashford had never had before. She wanted to know how he lived. She wanted to understand him. 20 minutes later, she was driving her Tesla through the rain-soaked streets of Redmond, heading toward the address in the file. It was an old 3-story building, peeling paint, sitting in a working-class neighborhood. The parking lot was filled with aging cars. A few children played ball on the patchy grass. Eleanor parked outside and looked up at the second-floor apartment, Unit 2B. Caleb's home. She didn't intend to go inside. She simply sat in the car, feeling like an intruder, yet unable to leave. 10 minutes later, she saw him. Caleb stepped out onto the balcony, pushing a small wheelchair. Daisy sat in it, brown hair tied neatly, wearing a pink dress with butterfly prints. He knelt down, positioning the wheelchair so his daughter could look out at the yard. He pointed downward, perhaps at a bird, or the drifting afternoon clouds. Daisy smiled. A tilted, imperfect smile, but full of joy. Caleb bent forward, kissed the top of her head, then began singing. Eleanor couldn't hear the words, but she saw his lips moving, saw Daisy trying to mimic him, bit by bit. A simple moment. A father. A disabled child. An old balcony. But to Eleanor, it was everything. She understood now. This was why he knew how to speak to Ruby and Pearl. He had been speaking this way to Daisy every single day. He was patient, because he had to be patient. He never gave up, because giving up would mean abandoning his own child. Eleanor's throat tightened. She didn't realize she was crying until a tear slid down her cheek. Caleb wasn't helping because of money. He was helping because he understood. And maybe because he still believed in something she had lost long ago. Miracles. Eleanor continued watching. Caleb pushed Daisy back inside. The lights in the small kitchen flicked on. He placed a pot on the stove, probably preparing dinner. A simple, difficult, but loving life. 3:40 p.m. Eleanor exhaled. She needed to return home. Just as she started the car, her phone vibrated with a message from Jennifer. Mrs. Ashford, Pearl just made a new sound. It sounded like she was calling her sister. You should come home. Eleanor read the message twice. Her heart jumped. She looked up at apartment 2B one last time. Then she drove back to Bellevue as fast as she could. By the time she arrived, it was fully dark. Eleanor almost ran up the stairs. In the care room, Jennifer stood up as soon as she entered. You should hear this, she said softly. Eleanor knelt beside the crib. Please, let me hear. Jennifer stroked Pearl's hair. Call your sister, sweetheart. Pearl glanced toward Ruby. Her lips quivered. Then a weak sound escaped. Ooh, B. Ruby. Eleanor's tears spilled instantly. For the first time in 5 years, she heard one child trying to call the other. She's done it 3 times now, Jennifer whispered. The first time was at 3 p.m. Caleb wasn't here. She did it on her own. Eleanor gathered Pearl into her arms, tears falling onto her daughter's hair. You did so well. Mommy is so proud of you. She touched Ruby's cheek. You too. You're finding each other again. That night, Eleanor stayed between their cribs until late. She didn't want to leave. She had never wanted to stay more than she did tonight. Jennifer left at 9. Do you need me to stay? No, thank you. I want to be with my girls tonight. The room was left with only Eleanor and the twins. She sat on the floor, staring into the dimness, her heart full. She thought about Andrew, about Caleb, about the two little girls slowly finding their voices, and about something she was feeling for the first time in 5 years. Hope. The next morning, Eleanor woke at 5 a.m., curled on the care room floor. Her neck ached, but she didn't regret it. She fixed the girls' blankets, then went to the kitchen to make coffee. At 7:30 a.m., she heard the back door open. Caleb had arrived. She stepped into the hallway, her heart beating faster for a reason she couldn't name. He was changing into his uniform in the laundry room. When he saw her, he startled slightly. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford." Eleanor stood in the doorway, looking at him. The man in the worn uniform, with calloused hands, but a heart stronger than anyone she had ever met. The image of him and Daisy on the balcony flashed in her mind. His smile, his resilience, and the way he never gave up. "Caleb," she said softly, "I want to thank you. Not just for what you've done for my daughters, but for reminding me what truly matters." He looked flustered. I'm just doing my job." "No," Eleanor interrupted. "You're doing far more than that. And I've seen it." Caleb didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, his eyes softening. Eleanor smiled, the first real smile she'd had in days. "You'll want to hear this. Yesterday, Pearl called Ruby's name. 3 times. Caleb's face lit up. "Really? She did it?" "Yes," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "And it's because of you. You gave them belief." Caleb bowed his head, as humble as ever. "They just need time and love." "The girls are waiting for you," Eleanor said. "They miss you." "I missed them too," he replied quietly. And in that moment, Eleanor knew everything had changed. Not just for her daughters, but for herself. She had lived like a ghost for 5 years, but Caleb, with his humility, his patience, and his unconditional love, had reminded her that life can begin again, even after the deepest pain. The air outside grew thick and heavy that afternoon. The Washington sky was swallowed by dense black clouds, and wind tore through the tall oaks surrounding Bellevue Hills like long warning sighs of an approaching storm. The weather report warned that tonight would bring a powerful storm, the kind Washington only saw once every several years. Eleanor stood by the office window, watching the garden tremble under the wind. She glanced at the clock. 4:45 p.m. Caleb usually ended his shift at 5. She went downstairs and found him cleaning in the laundry room. "Caleb?" she called softly. He turned. "Yes, ma'am?" "A storm is coming. You should go home to Daisy early today. The roads could get very dangerous." Caleb looked out the small window, worry flickering across his face. "Yes, ma'am. I plan to leave at 4:30, but—" He hesitated. "But what?" "The girls seem restless today," he said. "They keep turning toward the door. I think they can sense the storm." Eleanor understood. The girls were sensitive to weather shifts, to pressure changes. "You did well," she said. "Now go home to your daughter. I'll stay with Ruby and Pearl." Caleb nodded, though worry lingered in his eyes. "If you need anything, please call me. I'll keep my phone on." "I will," Eleanor replied. "Drive safely." Caleb left at 5:15, just as the first raindrops began tapping softly against the glass. Eleanor went up to the care room. Nurse Jennifer was preparing for the night shift. "Mrs. Ashford," Jennifer said, "I checked the forecast again. This storm might cause an outage. I've prepared flashlights and candles." "Thank you, Jennifer." The twins were already in their cribs, but not asleep. Their eyes were wide, staring up at the ceiling. Ruby's fingers twitched slightly. Pearl turned her head toward the window where the wind was slamming against the glass. Eleanor pulled a chair between the cribs. "I'm here, my loves," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." But the girls weren't calm. Their eyes kept shifting toward the door, as if waiting. They were waiting for Caleb. A sharp ache pressed into Eleanor's chest. She was their mother. Yet the person they sought was him. By 7 p.m., the storm truly hit. The wind grew into long, haunting howls. Rain hammered the windows like handfuls of pebbles thrown again and again. Then a thunderclap exploded, shaking the entire house. The lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out. "Power's out," Jennifer said, quickly turning on a flashlight. In the darkness, Eleanor heard something she had never heard before. The girls were crying, not whining, not soft, restless sounds. Real crying, panicked, terrified, choking cries. "Ruby! Pearl!" Eleanor leapt to the cribs. She lifted Ruby into her arms, holding her tight. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. Mommy's right here." But Ruby kept sobbing, and so did Pearl. Jennifer held Pearl. "They're very scared, ma'am. They've never experienced a storm like this." Eleanor rocked Ruby gently, trying to sing the lullaby from Andrew's notebook. But her voice shook. She couldn't make it steady or warm like Caleb's. The girls still cried. Another thunderclap boomed, even closer, rattling the window panes. Ruby cried harder, then suddenly released a sound unlike anything Eleanor had ever heard. It wasn't just a cry. It was a word. "Ka-leb." Eleanor froze. Pearl began too. "Ka-leb." Her voice was weak, trembling, but unmistakable. They were calling him. In their terror, the person they wanted was not their mother. It was Caleb. Eleanor's heart fractured, not out of jealousy or anger, but because she finally understood something deep and painful. She gently laid Ruby back into her crib. "Jennifer, stay with them. Keep them calm. I'll be right back." She ran downstairs, grabbed her phone, and dialed Caleb. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" Caleb's voice came through, wind and rain roaring behind him. "Caleb, it's Eleanor. The girls. They're calling your name. They're terrified. I don't know what to do." There was a brief silence. Then he said, "Can you put the phone near them? Let me talk to them." Eleanor ran upstairs immediately. She set the phone between the cribs and turned on the speaker. "They can hear you now," she said. Caleb's voice came through. Low, warm, familiar, even distorted by the storm. "Ruby, Pearl, it's Caleb. It's okay, sweethearts. The storm will pass. Mommy is right there with you. She loves you very much." The crying slowed. Caleb began singing, the same lullaby. Through the phone, the sound was scratchy, but the melody was clear, gentle, steady, comforting, just like always. Ruby calmed, Pearl calmed, their eyes fluttered, then closed, their breathing steadied. Eleanor sat down on the floor, tears pouring down her face. She listened to Caleb sing through the storm and realized a truth that was both painful and beautiful. Love isn't measured by blood. It's measured by who shows up when the child needs them most. When the song ended, the girls were fast asleep. Eleanor picked up the phone. "Caleb?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm home, ma'am. Daisy is scared of storms, too, but she's asleep now. I'm letting her sleep in my room tonight." Eleanor exhaled, relief washing over her. "You're a good father, Caleb." He paused, then said quietly, "And you're a good mother, Mrs. Ashford. You just need to believe that." Those words pierced her, not to hurt her, but to awaken her. "Good night, Caleb," she whispered. "I'll see you in the morning." "Good night, ma'am." The call ended. Eleanor sat in the darkness, the flashlight casting dim shadows on the wall. She looked at her daughters sleeping deeply. In all 5 years living in this house, she had never truly been present for them. She hired people, signed checks, and scheduled appointments. She hid from pain through work, through distance. But tonight, hearing them call Caleb, she didn't feel angry. She felt awakened. Jennifer watched her. "Mrs. Ashford, do you want me to stay so you can rest?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, I'll stay with them tonight." The nurse nodded. "I'll be in the next room if you need anything." When Jennifer left, only Eleanor and the twins remained. She sat between the cribs, holding Ruby's hand in one and Pearl's in the other. Then she began to sing. At first, her voice trembled, uneven, but slowly she found the melody, Andrew's lullaby. The song Caleb had brought back. This time, she wasn't singing because she thought she had to. She sang because her heart wanted to. The storm lasted past midnight. Around 1 a.m., rain still fell steadily, but the thunder had drifted far away. Eleanor remained there, singing the song she once thought she had forgotten. Sometimes she stopped just to watch their small, sleeping faces. She touched Ruby's cheek, then Pearl's. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for being gone so long, but from now on, I'll be here. I promise." Tears slid down her face. For the first time in 5 years, Eleanor wasn't crying from grief. She was crying from hope. Around 2 a.m., the storm had nearly dissipated. Rain fell lightly. The wind had calmed. The power was still out, but it no longer mattered. Exhaustion overtook her. She lay down on the floor, between the two cribs, staring up into the dim ceiling. She whispered into the quiet, "Andrew, if you can see me now, I've changed. I think I finally understand what you wanted me to learn all along." No answer came, only the soft breathing of her daughters and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. But Eleanor felt something, a warmth, like someone silently nodding in approval. She smiled in the darkness and closed her eyes. For the first time in 5 years, Eleanor Ashford slept beside her daughters, not out of duty, but because her heart had chosen to. Eleanor woke up in the pale sunlight streaming through the window. The power had been restored. She sat up, her neck sore from spending the whole night on the floor, but her heart felt light, as if she had finally set down the boulder she'd been carrying for years. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:30 a.m. The girls were still asleep, their breathing steady, their faces peaceful. Eleanor rose quietly, not wanting to wake them. The morning shift nurse, a young woman named Sarah, was preparing formula in the corner of the room. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford," she smiled, slightly surprised. "Did you sleep here all night?" Eleanor nodded, smoothing her hair back. "Yes, last night was very special." She went down to the kitchen, brewed a strong cup of coffee, then stood by the window, looking out at the garden. Broken branches were scattered across the lawn, the remnants of the storm. But the sky had cleared, and sunlight was slipping through the slowly dissolving clouds. At exactly 8 o'clock, the back door opened. Caleb stepped in, his uniform still marked with a few faint streaks of rain left over from the night before. Eleanor turned around. They looked at each other for a few seconds, neither of them speaking. Something in the air had changed, a wordless kind of connection. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice noticeably softer. "Yes, ma'am. Daisy is all right, too. She was a little shaken by the storm, but she smiled again this morning." Eleanor stepped closer. "Caleb, last night, the girls called your name. For the first time, they clearly formed a word, and that word was your name." Caleb's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes." Her voice still held a faint tremor. "And in that moment, I realized something. My daughters love you. Not because you're staff, but because you're the one who is always there, when they need someone." She paused for a beat, looking straight into his eyes. "And I realized something about myself, too. I've been running away for the last 5 years. I hired people to care for my children because I was afraid to love and lose again. But you showed me that loving someone doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means that even when you're afraid, you stay." Caleb listened in silence, not interrupting. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I want to ask you something, and you have every right to refuse." "Please go ahead, ma'am." "I want you to move in here, with Daisy." Caleb froze, clearly stunned. Eleanor spoke quickly, afraid he might misunderstand. "In the West Wing, there's a row of rooms that used to be for guests. 3 bedrooms, a private living room, and a small kitchen. You and Daisy could live there, rent-free, and I'll double your salary." She paused, then continued more slowly. "But not because of the money, not because I want to buy your dedication, but because—" Her voice suddenly tightened. It took her a few seconds to go on. "Because my girls need you. They need someone they trust. And I think Daisy deserves better care too. We have professional nurses here, like Jennifer, medical equipment, and safe spaces for her to play. I don't see this as charity. I see it as a fair arrangement." She held his gaze. "You help me care for Ruby and Pearl, and I help you care for Daisy. We do that as a family." The word family left her lips with difficulty, but Eleanor said it with all the sincerity she had. Caleb's eyes turned red. He turned his face to the side and wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. For a long moment, he couldn't speak at all. At last, his voice came hoarse. "You don't have to do this, ma'am." "I know," Eleanor replied softly, "but I want to, because you deserve it. Daisy deserves it. And my daughters, they deserve someone who will never give up on them." Caleb turned back to her, looking straight at her. His eyes were wet, filled with a deep emotion, gratitude, tenderness, and also the fear of responsibility. "I need to think about it," he said slowly. "For Daisy. I have to be sure this is the right thing for her. I don't want her to feel confused or feel like we're taking advantage of your kindness." Eleanor nodded. "I understand. Take as much time as you need. There's no rush." Caleb nodded gratefully, then quietly went upstairs. Eleanor remained alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding. What had she just done? Invited a man she'd only known for a few weeks to move into her home? With his daughter? But deep down, she knew it was the right thing. Not just because her children needed Caleb, but because she needed his presence too. Needed someone to remind her that love still existed, that family wasn't defined only by blood. 3 days later, Caleb didn't answer immediately. He said he needed time to talk to Daisy, to think everything through. Eleanor respected that. She didn't bring it up again, didn't push. But every day, she caught his gaze pausing on the West Wing as he walked past it. She saw him standing at the care room doorway, looking at Ruby and Pearl with a thoughtful expression, like he was weighing something far beyond his job. On Wednesday morning, Caleb came to see her in the office. "Mrs. Ashford, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course." Eleanor stood up and gestured. "Sit down, Caleb." This time he actually sat. To her, that alone felt like half an answer. He placed his hands on his knees, stared down for a long moment, then began. "I talked to Daisy. I told her about Ruby and Pearl, about this house, and about your offer." Eleanor waited in silence, her heart beating faster than usual. Daisy asked me, his voice caught, "Daddy, are they like me too?" I said, "Yes, they're like you." Then she asked, "So, can I play with them?" Tears rushed to Eleanor's eyes. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth. Caleb's eyes were red, too. "She's only 5, ma'am. And in her whole life, she's never had a real friend. No child understands her." He took a deep breath, then looked straight at Eleanor. "So, if you still want us, we'll move in. But I have one condition." "What is it?" Eleanor asked immediately, almost unable to breathe. "I won't take double pay. I'll only accept my current salary plus the housing, because I don't want to feel like I'm being paid to become part of the girls' lives. I want it to feel like this is really a family." Eleanor stepped closer to him, and, for the first time, she embraced Caleb. Not the way a boss hugs an employee, but the way two wounded people do. Two people trying to believe in something larger than themselves. Larger than money, titles, or contracts. "Welcome home, Caleb," she whispered. 1 week later, Caleb and Daisy moved in on a warm afternoon. Eleanor stood at the front door, watching his old car drive up the estate's entrance. Caleb got out first, then opened the back door and carefully lifted Daisy's wheelchair out. The little girl looked up at the large house with big, round eyes, both shy and curious. Eleanor walked down the steps. She lowered herself, kneeling to be at Daisy's eye level. "Hi, Daisy. You're Daisy, right?" The girl nodded slightly, a bit shy. "My name is Eleanor, and I'm very happy you're here. Ruby and Pearl are waiting for you inside." Daisy's eyes lit up. "Ooh, B." She tried to form the sound. Eleanor smiled, her eyes stinging again. "That's right, sweetheart. Ruby, you're doing so well." She stood and turned to Caleb. "Are you ready?" He nodded, a small but steady smile on his face. "Yes, ma'am. We're ready." They stepped through the doorway together, and for the first time in 5 years, the Ashford estate was no longer just a place filled with memories of loss. It had become the beginning of a new family. Dear listeners, sometimes love doesn't come from the people we expect. Sometimes it enters our lives quietly, through the hands of someone who simply refuses to let go. Caleb is not a doctor, nor is he a therapist. He is just a humble janitor, yet he carries within him a heart overflowing with tenderness. And with that very heart, he returned a voice to 2 children who had been trapped in silence their entire lives. And Eleanor, a woman who once believed that money could fix everything, learned that love cannot be bought, and healing does not always come from medicine or modern methods. It comes from presence, from patience, and from the simplest acts of care. This story reminds us that sometimes the people who seem the smallest and most ordinary are the very ones who carry the brightest light. And now, dear listeners, tell me, who touched your heart the most in this story? Was it Caleb, the man whose love could break through silence? Or was it Eleanor, the woman who finally learned to listen with her heart? Share your answer in the comments. I truly want to know what lesson you took away from this story. And if this journey moved you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next heartfelt, inspiring story. Because sometimes, just one small act of love can change a life forever.